2021 UK census revealed that there are 8,000 Britons who call themselves shamans, which makes it the fastest growing religion in England and Wales. I went to Cornwall to meet the Danish shaman Chris Luttichau, founder of the Northern Drum Shamanic Centre, so I could learn more about it.
Shamanism is a concept that has become very popular in the recent years, and there can be a bit of unclarity also about the definition of what shamanism is. But I think generally you could say that there are two major definitions, and one is one that has to do with and comes from people who have studied it, and that would include scholars who have really looked into the source, and basically what they say is that the word shaman comes from the Tungus people in Siberia, and the word shaman means the one who knows, the one who sees, or the one who heats up. And we can expand a bit about upon that later. But basically, what they say is the definition of a shaman is that the shaman is a man or woman who has direct contact with spirits. And the shaman is somebody who can take spirit flight, meaning that their spirit, their part of their soul, can leave the physical body and journey into the realm of spirit. Usually the purpose for doing so is to mediate between the humans and the spirits. And the main task of the shaman is healing. And the shamans can also, according to this definition, be taken over by a spirit. And then that spirit will work through the shaman, usually in order to perform healing. It can also be divination. That would be another major part of the shaman's work, is to guide the humans. So those two areas, healing and divination. So the shaman is also, according to this definition here, somebody who can go into what is called ecstasy, a state of ecstasy. And it basically means that the shaman can deliberately go into a trance state. And in that trance state, step outside of the ordinary self. So ecstasy, basically the root of the word means to stand outside oneself. That state then relates to the word shaman in its meaning to heat up. Because basically the shaman goes into an ecstatic state, and it's expressed often in singing and dancing, and eventually that state leads to the shaman coming into a place where he or she can perform healings and do other things to help the people in the community. So that is the one kind of more traditional shamanic definition. Now, in recent years, the New Age movement has been taking on a lot of ideas and influences from indigenous people, and then call that shamanism. So you can say what is emerging is kind of Western new shamanism that is not shamanism according to what scholars traditionally would define it. But at the same time, it is becoming a word that's widely used in the West now by people who maybe haven't fully understood and studied the source. There might be some major differences between the two definitions. But I suppose that's how it always is, that the world is changing and new words come in, and it can take a while, and then there can be some resistance, and that seems to be how it is with shamanism. But fundamentally, you can say that underneath shamanism is what we call animism. Animism, that is a worldwide kind of phenomenon amongst indigenous people. The word comes from the Latin word anima, which means breath, it means soul, it means spirit, and it basically means that everything is imbued with consciousness. Everything is alive, even the things that may appear to be not so alive, like a rock and a mountain. But from an indigenous point of view, from an animistic point of view, everything has some kind of consciousness, some kind of life force in it. And that basically is the foundation for all shamanic work, that you are aware of everything being alive. And it's a very different view and perspective than the Western perspective, where things are seen to be dead matter and then living objects. So there's a distinguishing factor there in the West, in the Western thinking, where indigenous thinking, animistic thinking, sees everything as one and everything being connected by the great web of life.
But that means the shaman is distinct in any culture from a priest. Would you say, like, a priest in an Aztec priest or an Egyptian priest is not the same thing as a shaman, in the sense that his religious authority requires a different social role?
That's right. And if you look at where you would find what traditionally is called shamanism, it is seen to emerge from Siberia and then spread out from there into northeastern Asia, and then you can find what, according to that definition, also would be termed shamanism in, for example, the northwestern United States, and maybe in Nepal, India, and some other places. But the role of a medicine woman, a medicine man, and a priest, and a herbal healer is different than the shaman. The shaman is somebody who works directly with spirit and can take a spirit flight and go into a trance state and channel those energies from spirit, usually for the purpose of healing and making sure that the world of the humans are in harmony with the world around them, with the natural world, but also with the cosmos and with the spiritual world and with the ancestors. So that's the main function traditionally of the shaman, is to make sure there's balance. But the shaman can also, of course, take on the role of a priest and perform ceremonies and rituals that are not maybe in their essence shamanic. In that way, there are many different functions, and it's good to be aware of the differences.
The cardigan is a button-down woolen jumper modelled on the wool waistcoat worn by British officers during the Crimean War. The garment was named after Lord Cardigan, who famously led the charge of the Light Brigade at the Battle of Balaclava. This fetching example was made in Ireland from 100% merino wool, which is comfortable and durable. The premium quality is evident from the fine, close-knit stitches. It was made by the Swedish brand Legio Gloria, whose sports and casual clothing are all ethically produced here in Europe. they also produce this cosy Atlantic merino wool jumper from Ireland. For thousands of years, both our ancestors and their sheep have known about the unique properties of wool, which not only keeps you warm, but also keeps you dry. These high-quality garments, and many others, are only available from the Legio Gloria webshop. Click the link in the description to browse their stock and equip yourself with everything you need to remain warm, comfortable, and handsome this winter. Chris, could you please tell me the story of how you came to shamanism?
Yes, for me it began as a child in a way, because as a child I discovered that I would see things, sometimes hear things that other people maybe didn't see and hear. And that is one of the things about shamanism, is that you are aware of the invisible world as well as the visible world, and also dreaming. So in dreams I would encounter animal spirits, and that continued into my teens and into my 20s. So I would say that my initiation into walking a shamanic path was primarily through dreams, and very strong dreams that had a big impact on me. And when waking up from those dreams, it felt kind of like I'd had a vision. And then later on I also began to have visions of animal spirits, and that then drew me to seek teachings on shamanism. I didn't know the word shamanism at that point. It was before shamanism became popular at all. So what I did was, I was born in Denmark, so I went north into Lapland in Scandinavia, and sought contact with the Sami, with the reindeer herders up there, and that's basically where I began to live in the wilderness. In the wilderness, I kind of went deeper in my contact with the earth, and the contact with spirit opened up for me also there. So in a way, you could say that...
You mean to say you had more dreams when you went to Lapland?
Yeah, dreams and kind of insights, and I received some guidance also. And then at one point I had a very strong dream where I saw that I was supposed to go to the USA, to the Americas. So after Lapland, I went to the Americas, in the United States first, and then later to South America and Mexico as well. And there I met with different indigenous people who shared some teachings. Those teachings were maybe not all shamanic teachings as such, but they were teachings on animal spirit, and they were teachings on how to live in harmony with oneself, with other people, and with the world in general. And I would say with Native Americans of North America, that they are people who have been extremely suppressed and persecuted, but still they have managed to maintain and preserve their teachings. And in my opinion, they basically have the teachings that if the rest of the world would listen to them, they have teachings on how to live in a balanced way, in a harmonious way here on Earth.
Which tribes specifically did you have most interaction with?
I had interactions with individual people. I lived up in Seattle for a while in Puget Sound, so there's those northwest coast American Indians who were quite open to share with the people who had a non-native background. And there were a man of Delaware origin. He had Delaware blood who shared teachings with me. There was one who had Cheyenne blood, and then there were others that I had contact with down in the southwest from the Navajo and other Pueblo tradition, and then later in Peru, high Andes Inca, and then in Mexico, mainly the Mexica in Mexico. So I spent some time there, and there were people there who were willing to share some of the teachings. When working with Native Americans, it's very important not to overstep and kind of claim to represent them, because it can be offensive to some of them if their teachings are diluted and used in a way that is maybe can be termed superficial. So but from those people I learned primarily about how the mind works and how to have respect for the land, and how to be in a community, and I learned something about prayer also. So that was quite a long time ago, and since then I have integrated and taken those teachings and let them inspire what I work with and what I teach today. So I teach things that are inspired by indigenous people, but I don't kind of copy them as such. So I do that kind of out of respect for those indigenous traditions. And then I have also had a couple of teachers of European traditions who were channels, and basically you could say shamans, and could channel directly from spirit shamanic teachings. And so in that respect, the main part of my teachings come directly from spirit, as opposed to from human teachers, so to say.
And that's the difference between a shaman and a priest, isn't? It's my understanding, because a priest learns about his gods from teachings, and a shaman has direct contact with the spirit power.
Yeah, and that's why also you could say that shamanism is not a religion, because it doesn't have a book that you're supposed to follow. It doesn't have any dogmas that require that you believe in certain things. It doesn't have rules as such. As I see shamanism, it is basically going back to the root of the word shaman, the one who sees. So interestingly enough, shamanism is basically the same all over the earth, even though those people were on different continents and didn't have contact with each other. They all saw that we have power animals, animal spirit helpers. They all saw we had spirit guides from the upper world. Most of them saw the world tree. So it is basically shamanism, as I see it, it is an exploration of reality, and to perceive as clearly as possible reality in the invisible world as well as in the physical world. So to understand reality as clearly as possible, because you see clearly, and that then brings us to clairvoyance, that shamans have some degree of clairvoyance, whether that clairvoyance comes through sight or hearing or through feeling, but it has to do with perceiving with clarity and perceiving those things that maybe are hidden to most people.
At which stage in this journey you've described did you identify your own power animal, spirit animal, and did that then help you to understand the dreams that you'd had when you were younger?
That's right. It took me a long time, years actually, to decide which one was my power animal, my soul animal, so to say, the animal of my soul. And the final clarity about it came in a dream. And when I had that dream, it was as if my understanding of previous dreams began to open up. That is, of course, also the traditional way in shamanism, that you get a lot of the information, a lot of the teachings directly from what we perceive as spirit through dreams and through visions. And then I remember there was one night where I was on my way to go to sleep, and as I was stepping towards the bed, I saw my animal in front of me very, very, very clearly. So after that point, there was no doubt at all. I think it's generally a good idea just to wait and not hurry with finding out what is your power animal, because when it comes, it can be very, very empowering to suddenly realize it on a deep inner level.
So it wasn't actually from instruction that you, or from Native Americans or anyone else that you identified it was just through a spiritual experience?
Yeah, it was through a direct vision, and then through some dreams also. It was as if the animal spirit revealed itself to me. Maybe I had been tested for so long, where I had been curious and trying to find out what it was, and then finally it revealed itself. So I felt that was kind of like initiation for me, and the things were in some ways different after that.
Can you help me to understand the way that you make use of this power animal during shamanizing, shamanic journeying, and also what role does this tree that you mentioned in many cultures play in the journeying of the shaman?
Yeah, okay. Well, if we take the tree first, the tree is a universal image of the cosmos, and it works on two levels. One is the greater cosmos, the macrocosmos, and then the tree also represents the human being, and so that would be the microcosmos. And the tree has three realms. One is the root, which is the lower world, which is the place of animal spirits and power animals, and it's also the place of the primordial instinctual powers. It is the place of grounding, and it's the place of life force, raw life force from the earth, so to say. Then we have the middle world, which is the world of the humans. And the middle world can basically be understood as the reality we all kind of walk around in and agree upon. So we have trees, and we have houses, we have cars, humans, animals, and so forth. So that is the middle world. But the middle world also has a spiritual aspect, an invisible aspect, so that could maybe be called the other world, where you find nature spirits and other beings. In the Norse tradition, the elves and the dwarves and so forth. So they are in the middle world, but in the other world, the other side of the middle world, so to say.
The hidden part of it.
Yeah, exactly. And then we have the upper world. And if we take the Norse tradition, then the guardian, so to say, of the upper world is the eagle. And that is also the case in North America with the Iroquois Nation, for example. They also have an eagle sitting in the top of the tree. And the eagle basically represents the bird that flies closest to the sun. So the bird that flies closest to the light. So the eagle represents higher consciousness, and that is what the upper world basically is about. It's the realm where you will find the beings of higher consciousness, where they reside. So those are the three basic worlds, and the shaman, in the traditional definition of shamanism, is a man or woman who can leave the body, so to say, and journey to the lower world, to the upper world, and in that way the shaman becomes a messenger between the worlds, and the purpose is to make sure that there's a balance between the humans and then the cosmos. And in the Norse tradition, there is an animal that runs up and down the world tree, the tree of life, and that is the red squirrel. And it's seen then that the red squirrel really represents the shaman as the messenger between the worlds.
He's the Ratatosk.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So the shaman is like the squirrel, and he navigates the worlds using the tree as a. But what about when they're shamanizing within this middle world? Because in the Norse sources I'm aware of, there are sort of spirit projections or journeys down to the underworld. I'm not aware of any of them trying to go up in a spirit projection, but most of the shamanic style spiritual projection in the Norse tradition is within this world, sending out an animal shape to in this world to go and spy on someone or do something like that. Is that what would you wouldn't then presumably use the tree to navigate if you were doing that? You would.
Well, typically you could say that when the shaman journeys, whether it's to upper, middle, or lower world, the shaman goes through a gateway, and to journey to lower world, it's typically a hole at the root of the world tree, and to the upper world it can be through the branches, but the gateway for a middle world journey can be anything. It could even be the door in a house, but it can also be journeying between branches. But the reason why in the Old Norse tradition most journeys were middle world journeys was that there's a practical aspect to it also. So in order to find the lost cow, for example, in order to find the lost child, in order to find out where can we get fish, where can we catch the fish, where is there deer to be hunted. So for survival reasons, the shaman played a major role in the community in the old days, because she or he could advise the people on survival issues, basically, and help bring in food and help find a lost child and so forth. So those, for that purpose, the shaman would do a spirit journey in the middle world, and then go and check out where are the fish, that in what sound should we go to catch fish and so forth. Today that is maybe less important because we have other means to find out about those things, and so in that way the function of the shaman maybe has shifted in that respect, even though middle world journeys of course can still be done shamanically today.
And is like a shamanic healing ritual a middle world journey, or does it involve maybe journeying to collect power from another world to have to heal the person, or which category would you class shamanic healing under?
Well, shamanic healing can give access to both the upper world, lower world, and middle world. So when the shaman traditionally does healing, she or he will generally begin to work towards going into a trance state. And a trance state involves ultimately that the personality, the ego, steps outside of the physical body. And that's then relates to the word ecstasy, stepping outside of oneself. And this is so that a spirit can come in. So it's seen that if the ego is there, then there's not much space for spirit, and then not much space for higher consciousness and the healing powers to come in. So that's why the shaman will leave and then become what sometimes in North America is referred to as the hollow bone. And then the hollow bone is then filled up with the powers that can heal. And sometimes the shaman will draw on powers from the lower world in order to do healing, and that would include the power animal. So traditionally, the power animal from the lower world plays a major role in the healing work, both in extracting things and also in bringing in sacred power that can heal. But the upper world is definitely also used because that's where typically shamans will channel light from, the light that heals. And spirit guides from the upper world can also come and basically be present with the shaman and even take over the body of the shaman and work through the shaman. And animal spirits can do the same and, for example, work through the hands of the shaman. And in that way, you could say that the shaman also can draw on powers from the middle world. For example, from sacred mountains or sacred rocks or sacred trees or sacred rivers, sacred lakes and so forth. Depending on
power objects as well. I understand that shamans sometimes use personal objects for.
Yeah, definitely. Shamans have what you could term shamanic objects, power objects, that are used in the healing, and that typically involves rocks, and it can also involve things that are connected to animals. And those objects are typically acquired through fasting out in nature. And sometimes shamans traditionally will be shown in a dream what object they should find and then use for healing. So there are many power objects that are used in the process of healing, depending on what continent you live on. But in the Americas, for example, crystals are used. Shamans traditionally do what we call bridging. So create a bridge between the spirit world and the physical world. and that bridge usually manifests as a physical object, are used in the physical world, but they get their power from the spirit world. And in the North tradition, the rainbow is a bridge between the spirit world and the physical world, and it's called Bifrost. And it is the bridge upon which the gods or spirits connect with the humans, and humans can travel to the world of the spirit on that rainbow bridge.
Do you find that as a Dane, the similarities between traditionally shamanic cultures, things like that the Norse tradition has, such as spirit animals, the fylgjer, and the way that Vitki and Vitka can project spirit shapes as well, and also the world tree linking the world. Is this something that has helped you to identify with the shamanic cultures, or do you find that your ethnicity is an obstacle to integrating with the shamanic traditions of Native Americans?
Well, I have found over the years that when you use your spirit sight, when you begin to work shamanically, and the shamanic eye, so to say, the shamanic senses open up, then it doesn't matter whether you are from the Norse tradition, like if you're born in Scandinavia, or from Siberia, or from North America. Basically, what you perceive is the same thing. And what I found is that in the Norse tradition, there is this concept of fylgjer, means followers. And that basically means that the Old Norse people saw that when a human being is born, there's an animal spirit that comes and joins them. It's a guardian spirit, it's a protector, and also a guide, and it remains with that person for life, and is their companion, friend, and guardian. In North America, I found that the Native Americans, they have pretty much an identical concept of spirit animals and power animals, or whatever term they use for them. So it's again, the spiritual reality is the same whether you are from Scandinavia, or from North America, or South America. So it is basically the web of life that is the same wherever you are on the planet. And I think a deeper spiritual truth is the same for everyone, no matter what tradition we come from, and no matter what culture we belong to. And it is, of course, important to respect other people's culture, but at the same time, we all come from the same background, which is spirit, and we all have access to power animals. We all have access to spirit guides. We all have access to the same spiritual reality. So ultimately, the cultural differences, as I see it, are surface things.
I've read about Ojibwe tribal shamanic practices, and rather like in the Norse culture, the people who practice things we generally would term shamanism now weren't always liked in their communities, and were sometimes people a little bit afraid of them or didn't like them, including maybe other shamans. There are some practices in shamanism that are for hurting people. Could you explain, are there negative consequences, do you think, for these kind of things? And to what extent is this a valid part of shamanism in its various manifestations?
Yeah, good point. It's a good one to be aware of and know a little bit about. So the function of the shaman traditionally is to be a healer and to help people. But as always, when it comes to human beings, power can be misused and has been misused. Like it's revealed is happening today with the Catholic Church, a tremendous amount of misuse within the Buddhist tradition. A lot of misuse are being revealed these days, and the same can also be said about shamanism. So when we use spiritual power to hurt, then if we look at it from the Old Norse tradition, then there's a concept called skuld, meaning that you owe something. So when you have used shamanic power for your own gain, so to say, selfish gain, and to inflict damage, you then have a debt. So skuld means also debt, and that debt traditionally then means that maybe not immediately, but over time that debt will be collected. And that means you begin to lose what in the Norse tradition is called your magen, or your spiritual power. Your might, yeah, but it's M-E-G-I-N, magen, and that has to do with your spiritual essence, with your vital life force, and the seeing in the Old Norse tradition is that eventually it's payback time. And that spiritual power that you have will be diminished because of having inflicted damage upon other people. And personally, I have also witnessed that in some cases, seen that people who behaved in that manner eventually began to lose their power. And I think amongst the Iroquois in North America, they have a concept called orenda, which is very similar to the Norse magen, might concept. So again, these shamanic concepts are the same all over the planet. But yes, sometimes shamans have used their power in order to inflict damage. And if you look to the Far Eastern tradition, they would say that then you build up a karma that you have to pay for later. But so there are different terms for it, but they all basically point to the same thing, that there's a cause and there's an effect, and we whatever we do, it comes back to us. What goes around comes around.
I've also read that among Native Americans and Siberians, there's a belief that someone who has the shamanic gift or power, who doesn't practice, can become sick as a result. And I don't know. I was wondering also whether that was whether malpractice could also cause sickness, or whether there's what role does misuse or lack of use of a shamanic ability play into the physical health of an individual?
Yeah, well, if we start with the lack of use of the shamanic power, then that is connected to the fact that shamans traditionally in Siberia and other places are people who are chosen by the spirits. So shamans are not people who want to become shamans, but they are people whom the spirits have chosen to take on that function. So shamans are traditionally, we say, chosen by the spirits, trained by the spirits, confirmed by the people. And if the spirits have chosen someone and begin to train them, and part of the training often will be that that person also learns from a human being. But the training is usually a combination of learning both directly from spirit and from a shaman who's already a trained shaman. And if such a person who is trained doesn't use their power to be of service and help the people and heal the people, then in Siberia and other places, it is seen that then they pay a price for that. And part of that price can be that they lose their shamanic abilities, but also that there can seem to be that things begin to go a bit downhill for such a person. And when it comes to malpractice, it is seen that eventually malpractice leads to the loss of the magical powers, the loss of the ability to see and so forth, and can even lead to insanity in the worst case scenario. So a malpractice is it's similar to in what we talked about earlier with the Norse tradition with skuld or debt, that you pay a price for creating a disharmony in the world.
Can you talk a bit about the relationship between the spirit that is the self, rather than spirits that exterior spirits that are commanded or petitioned by a shaman, and how this relates to breath and your theory of vital life force?
Yeah, breath has in the last few years become a major focus in the spiritual circles here in the West, and the word spirit is in Latin it's anima, which means both soul and spirit, and it means breath also. If we then go to the Norse tradition again, on means both the spirit and in the sense of your own spirit, and also the spirit outside yourself, and it means breath. So a fascinating connection worldwide between your soul, your spirit, and then the breath. And shamans traditionally, when they do, for example, soul retrieval, they use their breath to bring the soul back to the client. So, and in Mexico, apparently there are methods for using the breath to heal one's past and to retrieve one's lost power. And so breath is in that respect an integral part of shamanic work, and always when you go back in time, the breath is basically seen to be where your spirit resides, so to say. And if you look at shamanism worldwide, you'll find that pretty much all shamanic tribes, so to say, have distinguish between three souls or three spirits within the human being. So now we're talking about the internal aspect of the spirit. And the first one is the vital breath soul. So if that soul leaves, we die. So that is what you could term the vital soul.
And we stop breathing.
Yeah, yes. So the moment you stop breathing, you die. And the soul leaves, so to say. But the second soul is referred to as the free soul. And that soul can leave the body when you go on astral projection or when you go on a spirit flight, what today often is called out-of-body journeys. And you don't die because that soul has left. And it comes back and unites with the body. And that is the one that shamans traditionally use for the spirit flight. The third soul is what we could term the eternal soul, and is maybe what we would call the spirit. So that is that eternal, perfect aspect of ourselves that we will unite with after death. So those three aspects are seen all over the world. Some have more than three. I think the Vikings had 9, and some American Indian tribes have 4. But they all kind of can be put into those 3 categories there. And the breath is seen to be the source of that vital soul that it gives life, basically. So breath, therefore, is seen as traditionally something mysterious, something sacred, and in South America, I came across people who said they would journey on the wind with their breath. So they would go on a journey on the out breath and leave with the out breath and go out and visit mountains and forest and on the wind, and then come back again. And also the wind and the breath is seen to be connected to the ancestors, so that the ancestors and the guides, the spirit teachers, can talk to us and guide us through the wind, and we can hear them if we listen from that place of stillness within. And therefore the breath can also be used to calm the mind, so that we can enter that still place within, from where we can then connect with ancestors, connect with the spirit, connect with the power animals, and basically connect with the source of all life. So the breath plays a major role in that. I've seen indigenous people just slowing down the breath in order to connect with spirit, and slowing down the heart beat also, but through slow breathing. And then from that place of having found that still place within, then comes the connection to spirit, and also you could say from that still place within, the connection to the true self, which is a self that's not thought-based, but kind of a deep inner still place that is also part of traditional shamanic training, to learn to master the mind, like in Siberia and other traditions. Shamans and also medicine people, if they're not specifically shamans, they learn to master their mind. And it's through the mastery of the mind that they then become able to focus their mind like a laser, so that they can do feats that maybe would be considered supernatural. But because part of their training is to master their mind, they gain that kind of power. And all of that is closely related to the breath. And nowadays, of course, Wim Hof has made breathing very popular, and there are a real revival of breath work in that respect. Yeah.
I wonder if there's a conflict between what you described earlier as shamanism relating to ecstasy, and a kind of ecstasy is a sort of frenzied state almost. And I've seen footage and read about shamans who work themselves up into a frenzy and put hot coals in their hands or in their mouth and do these kind of frenzy things. It seems quite a contrast with what you described about this place of calm and stillness. Is that how do those two states conflict with one another in the shamanic practice?
Yeah. Well, very good point. And traditionally, a shaman is somebody who goes into that state of ecstasy, and it is typically very wild. Like the leading up to that can be a very wild dance and drumming and singing, and that is where the shaman goes deeper and deeper into the trance, and can perform things, like you say, with hot coals and other things that we would normally consider impossible and physically not possible to do. But there are, witnessed accounts from people who have seen the shamans do those things. So that is one of the things that characterize the shaman, is that they go into that kind of ecstatic trance state, and from that place can perform what you could call miraculous feats. At the same time, shamans also know how to go into stillness. So they can basically achieve a degree of mastery of both. So they have control of their mind, and they can leave the body and go into that ecstasy and the wild dance. If you go to indigenous people, you will find that many of them, they teach the children to master their mind at a very, very early age, so that a child can sit still for hours with their eyes open and observe the forest, observe the birds and the animals. And that training in the old days had a survival aspect to it, so that if there were enemies, and if you needed to learn to become a good hunter, and if you live in areas where there were dangerous animals, you needed to be able to be very, very still and observe and not move the body and be very, very present and have an alertness, but be still inside. And there was a woman who was a photographer for National Geographic. She was asked by the interviewer, how come you have become world famous by photographing ice and only ice? And so she was on expeditions to Greenland and to Antarctica and the North Pole and so forth, and she only photographed ice, and became highly, highly successful. And she said that she was Native American, and from age 5 her grandfather would train her traditionally, and he would come and walk her into the woods, sit her down, and say he would come and pick her up in 1 hour. And then during that hour, she had to sit completely still and just observe and not move the body at all. And that training was every day, sun, rain, snow, from age 5 to she was 14. And that, she said, is a traditional indigenous training where traditional indigenous people are taught to master their mind. And it obviously has survival benefits, especially in the old days, but it also makes a more harmonious human being and therefore a more harmonious human tribe, a tribe of people. So shamans, when you read the old about the old shamans and their training, it did involve also learning to still the mind and basically be the master of your own thoughts and your own emotions. So that is traditionally part of the training. But at the same time, when it comes to doing shamanic healing work and doing a shamanic session in general, with the drum, for example, then it goes to the other end of the spectrum as far as the singing and the shouting and the dancing, and it can it can appear very, very wild, and it also has to do with that shamans traditionally are strongly connected to the earth, to the animal self also, and through that are able to access states of consciousness where there are endless possibilities for what you can perform, so to say. Both when it comes to healing and also physical feats, like you mentioned, this putting red hot coals into the mouth and not be burned, and there are accounts of shamans putting their hands into boiling water, holding them inside the boiling water and taking them out again, and they are unhurt. So that is mind over matter. And that is part of the training of shamans, even though, of course, each tribe would have different emphasis and different trainings and traditions.
Sounds like the calmness has to be learnt before the frenzy is going to work. But for anyone watching who maybe they think they might benefit from a shamanic healing or something, or visiting a shaman. People watching from around the world might have different access to different people. But I understand that some American tribes, the actual process of being a patient of a shaman can be an initiation into being a shaman. I read about an account in a book, and it was their being healed which led them to being a healer. Is this something common in shamanism, or is that just an unusual story?
Well, that's another key point you're bringing forward there, because the shaman is sometimes traditionally described as the wounded healer, meaning that if you go to Siberia, to the source of shamanism, basically, typically a shaman would be somebody who went through a very severe initiation, often one that brought them close to death, and maybe even died, and then had like a near-death experience and came back from the realm of the dead. And then you could say that the shamanic initiation traditionally is a death and rebirth initiation. And there are other ways to be initiated traditionally. In Siberia also, being mentally ill could lead to them becoming a shaman. So shamans traditionally go through some kind of initiation illness and then heal themselves fully, so they come out on the other side strong and in their full power. So that breaking down of the old structure, and then the birth and emergence of a new structure is part of the traditional initiation of the shaman, and sometimes it's referred to as dismemberment, where the image, the symbol of this dismemberment is that the flesh is cut off the bones, so that there's only the skeleton left. That is an shamanic initiation. And then once there's only the skeleton, then the rebirth happens, and you are renewed, and you get the new flesh back, and you come back in your full shamanic power. So sometimes if somebody comes to a shaman and they are, have a serious illness, and the shaman begins to work on them, guide them through a healing process, such a person might then themselves be called to become a shaman. And in that way, illness can definitely, and definitely also is traditionally, a portal into the shamanic path. And the illness can be both mental, emotional, physical, and usually very, very severe. And that's why in traditional shamanic cultures, there would often be people would often be reluctant to become shamans, because they knew there's a high price to pay in that initiation. And it's basically the breaking down of the old structure, including breaking down of the ego, and then a more true self emerging. So that is something that is very core in shamanism, this initiation process.
Anecdotally, I know I've read many people and heard about from many people telling me, and I've personally experienced very unusual dreams when sick. When I have some illness, a fever or something, you can have dreams that seem more important. They seem like significant dreams that you should write down, because and it's something to do with the fever can bring that on. And it reminds me of what I've heard about shamans who have gone through the process you described of being sick before they realised they could do that, be shamans. But yeah, I think this has been a very good interview. And would you like to promote any events or your book or anything before we end?
Well, I have a website called northerndrum.com, and I do shamanic training groups through Northern Drum, and I have written a couple of books. Third book is on its way. Yeah.
And they can find the book on your website?
On the website, or Amazon, or on the internet in general. Yeah.
Thank you very much for your time, Chris.
It's been a pleasure talking with you.